She looked at the leg I've dragged behind me for 31 years and told a room full of strangers it was going to embarrass her son. Let that sit with you for a second, because I sat with it a lot longer than a second. My name's Walter Combs. I'm 66 years old. I've lived in Tulsa my whole life. And up until about 4 months ago, I would have told you the worst thing that ever happened to me was already behind me. I would have been wrong. Get comfortable, friend. Pour your coffee. This one's going to take a minute, and I think you're going to want to hear the whole thing. Let me set the scene first, because that's where this whole mess started coming apart at the seams. The private room at that country club out past Southern Hills smelled like lilies and old money, white linen everywhere. A string quartet warming up in the corner, even though this was just the rehearsal dinner, not the wedding itself. Apparently, when you're marrying into the Fenwick family, even the practice run gets a string quartet. I sat near the end of the table, across from my son Dale and his fiance's parents. The Fenwicks, third generation oil money, the kind of family that's had a standing reservation at that club since before I was born. My ex-wife Carol sat 2 seats down, laughing too loud at something Mrs. Fenwick said about the flowers. Roger, Carol's husband, Dale's stepfather, had his arm slung over the back of her chair like a man showing off a car he didn't pay for. Man talks about his golf handicap like it's a personality. 28 years I raised that boy. 28 years. And I'm sitting at the far end of the table like a distant cousin nobody quite remembers inviting. The server set down the salad course, and I reached for my water glass with my right hand, the one that doesn't work like a hand's supposed to work anymore. That's when I saw Dale's eyes drop down to it, then to my leg stretched out a little sideways under the table because it doesn't bend at the knee the way it used to. I know that look. I've had 31 years to get used to people seeing it. I never really did. Dad, Dale said, quiet at first, then leaning in like he'd rehearsed it somewhere private. I love you, but the leg brace, the way you walk. The table went a little quiet. Mrs. Fenwick suddenly found her wine glass very interesting. It's loud, Dale said. That metal creak when you shift your weight. Sabrina's photographer already flagged it during the venue walkthrough, said the sound might carry during the vows if you're standing up front. He gestured toward Roger like he was presenting a car on a showroom floor. Roger doesn't have any of that. He walks normal. He looks right in photos. And the Fenwicks are particular about how things look. A breath. Then the knife went in slow. He's going to walk me and Sabrina both down that aisle, actually, since her father passed. It just makes sense for him to do it for me too. You can sit up front, obviously. Just not walk. Nobody said a word. Roger had the decency to look uncomfortable, studying his salad like it had personally wronged him. Carol didn't. Carol looked relieved, like she'd been waiting years for somebody else to say it first. I looked down at my hand wrapped around that water glass. I want to tell you I said something. Some perfect line, some gut punch of a comeback that put him in his place. I didn't. I've replayed that moment, probably 300 times since, and every single time I do exactly what I did that night. I nodded. I stood up. I folded my napkin once, the way my father taught me, set it by my plate, and walked out of that room without saying a single word. You built a boy's whole life on this leg, and he just told a table full of strangers it makes too much noise. Oklahoma back roads at 10 o'clock at night don't care that somebody just carved your heart out with a butter knife over salad course. I drove for almost an hour, radio off, just my thoughts and the sound of my own tires on the highway. I kept looking down at my hand on the wheel, then at the brace under my pant leg, really looking at it the way you look at something after somebody tells you it's an embarrassment. Like maybe this time you'll finally see what they see. I didn't cry. I want that on the record. Walter Combs does not cry on Highway 75. But something sat in my chest the whole drive home. Heavy and useless, all the way back to my place off Peoria Avenue. Modest house. Small, one story. The kind of place a man buys when he's got money he's decided never to spend on himself. I let myself in, dropped my keys in the bowl by the door, and stood in my kitchen not knowing what to do with my hands, which, given the conversation I'd just walked out of, felt like a cruel joke, all its own. I ended up in the spare room. I use it as an office, though that's generous. It's a recliner and a filing cabinet and a shoebox I never got around to putting into a real photo album. I sat down in that recliner and opened the box. First photo on top. Dale, maybe 8 years old, grinning with a chocolate ice cream cone in one hand and my hand in the other, both of us standing outside the old Brahms on 21st Street. There he is. There's my boy. And that's when it all came back. Not slow, all at once, like a door blowing open in a storm. You want to know who I was before all this? I'll tell you. Every Saturday, rain or shine, I picked Dale up right after my shift ended at the refinery. I worked the maintenance crew out at the plant off Highway 412. Good union job, decent pay, the kind of work that puts calluses on a man and doesn't apologize for it. I'd still have my coveralls half unzipped and my hard hat pushed back on my head, and he'd come tearing across the yard yelling, "Daddy," like I'd been gone a year instead of 10 hours. We had a routine. Brahms for ice cream. He always got chocolate, always, no matter how many times I told him they had 30 other flavors sitting right there. He'd hold my hand the whole walk over, swinging our arms like we were the only two people in the state of Oklahoma. And when we got close to the plant gates on the way back, I'd lift him up onto my shoulders so he could wave at the crew on the catwalk. "There's my hero." He'd shout down at me, chocolate dripping onto my collar. And every one of the guys up there would laugh and wave right back. There was a fellow named Earl Whitfield who worked that crew with me for almost 15 years, used to say, "Combs, that boy's going to run this whole city someday. You wait and see." I believed every word of it. Those Saturdays were the best hours of my week, better than payday, better than the Sooners covering the spread, which, let's be honest, wasn't happening near often enough to be a real source of joy anyway. I had no idea one of those Saturdays was going to be the last normal one I'd ever have. It was an ordinary Saturday. Payroll had messed up my direct deposit that week, one of those things you don't think twice about, so I swung by the plant to pick up a paper check before we headed to Brahms. Dale had been in that building 100 times. Everybody on shift knew him by name. He was sitting at the break room table drawing on a napkin while I walked over to the office window to grab my envelope. I heard it before I understood it. A groan of metal, low and deep, like the building itself clearing its throat. Then a bang I felt in my back teeth. A pressure valve on one of the processing lines had failed, and superheated steam, the kind that can strip skin off in a heartbeat, came ripping out of a ruptured joint like a fire hose made of scalding air. "Dale," I didn't think. There wasn't a single word in my head. My body just moved. I covered the distance to that break room table in maybe 2 seconds flat and threw myself over him, wrapped my arms and back toward the blast, made myself as big as I could between my son and that spray. It caught me across the back, down the leg, mostly the leg, because that's what I'd swung around to shield him low to the ground. I don't remember the pain the way you'd expect to. I remember Earl's voice screaming my name from somewhere that felt very far away. I remember a smell like scorched fabric and something metallic and wrong. I remember Dale underneath me, screaming, completely unhurt. Not one drop of that steam touched him. Not one single drop. He walked away from that day without a mark anywhere on his body. I didn't. Earl saw the whole thing happen. He was the first one to reach us, pulled Dale out from under me while I was still down on that floor. He never forgot it either. Man still calls me every single year on the anniversary, just to check in. Some things you don't stop caring about even when you weren't the one who got hurt. I'd do it again. 1,000 times over, I'd do it again. That was never the question. The question, the one nobody bothered to ask me for the next 20 years, was what it would cost me afterward. You'd think a man throwing himself in front of scalding steam for his son would earn him something. Gratitude. A little grace. At minimum. The benefit of the doubt. Carol filed for divorce 5 months later. I remember sitting across from her in a lawyer's office downtown, my legs still in a brace, still learning how to walk without wincing on every third step. She wouldn't even look at it. "You brought him to that plant, Walter," she said, flat and cold, like she'd rehearsed it in a mirror, the same way Dale would 28 years later. "You're careless. I can't trust you not to put him in danger again. Careless." I nearly laughed. I would have laughed if it hadn't hurt so much just to breathe deep. "Carol," I threw myself in front of, "I know what you did." She cut me off, sharp. "I know exactly what you did." And that was the thing. She did know. She knew better than anybody alive. That's what made it so much worse. This wasn't ignorance talking. This was guilt wearing anger like a Halloween mask, because it's a lot easier to stay furious at somebody than to sit with the fact that you weren't the one who saved your own child. She got full custody. I got weekends, then every other weekend, then slowly. The way a puddle spreads so gradually you don't notice you're standing in it until your shoes are already wet, I got less than that. And somewhere in those years, she started rewriting the whole story. I didn't catch it happening in real time. You never do. But looking back now, I can trace the shape of it. Little comments that filtered back to me secondhand. Dale telling a Sunday school teacher his dad got hurt because he wasn't paying attention. Dale at 12 asking me why I let that happen. Not what happened to you. Why did you let that happen? 20 years Carol had that boy's ear every single day, and I had him every other weekend if the schedule cooperated. You do the math on whose version of the story was going to win out. She turned the proof of how much I loved that boy into evidence against me, and I didn't even see her do it while it was happening. The lawsuit against the refinery took almost 4 years to settle. Corporate negligence, a maintenance log that had been falsified for over a year, the whole ugly truth about how a company let a pressure valve rot until it blew a hole clean through a father's leg. I won. Won big. The kind of settlement that changes a family's whole trajectory. I never touched a dime of it. I know how that sounds. My own attorney thought I'd lost my mind. Walter, you could buy a house out in Jenks with a view of the river. You could retire tomorrow morning. And I sat there in his office, in the same steel-toed boots I'd worn my whole working life. And I told him no. Because somewhere in the back of my skull, Carol's voice was still sitting there, careless. If I spent that money making my own life easier, wasn't that just proof she'd been right about me all along? So I did the only thing that made sense to a man who'd already given a leg for his son. I put every dollar into a discretionary trust. Locked, protected, managed by me and only me. Set to release at his milestones. 25th birthday, marriage, a first house, someday, if he wanted one. I kept working. Moved into inspection work after the refinery, steady hours, nothing flashy. Kept that same small house off Peoria. Drove a used Ford pickup with 160,000 miles on it that I maintained myself because I wasn't paying a mechanic for work these two ruined hands could still manage. People probably figured I was just cheap. Let them think it. Truth was, I was saving every dollar I never spent for a boy who, by then, could barely stand to look at me straight on. Carol remarried when Dale was 19. Roger Ashby, slick talker, always wearing a quarter-zip pullover even in July. Leased a new truck every 18 months, like they were a pair of boots wearing out. Called himself an independent energy consultant, which in my experience is what a man says when he doesn't actually have clients. I didn't think much of him at first. Figured he was harmless. Smooth, sure, the way a timeshare salesman is smooth, but harmless. I was wrong about that too. Somewhere around Dale's mid-20s, Roger started taking a real interest in his finances. Not mine. He knew that trust was locked up tight, and he wasn't getting anywhere near it through me. But Dale's future access to it. Started talking to him about protecting his inheritance. About smart positioning ahead of the big payout. Smart positioning. That's a phrase from a man who's never had 2 nickels of his own worth positioning anywhere. He walked Dale through some paperwork one evening. I know this now. Pieced it together after the fact. Paperwork that used Dale's future trust distribution as collateral on a commercial loan. Roger needed for some energy venture that never quite existed the way he described it at dinner parties. Told Dale it was routine. Told him it was safe. Told him, probably in that same smooth quarter-zip voice, that he needed to sign it to protect what was already coming to him. Dale trusted him. He was desperate by then to impress the family he was marrying into. The Fenwicks, old oil money, watching him the way you watch a stock you haven't decided whether to buy yet. So he signed. He had no idea what he was signing away, and I had no idea at the time what Roger was building, brick by brick, lie by lie, on the foundation of a trust I had bled for. I sat there in that recliner with that photograph in my hand, chocolate ice cream, his hand in mine, both of us grinning outside that old Brahms. And for a second I let myself just be in it. Let myself remember what it felt like before any of this. Before the hospital, before Carol's lawyer, before a country club dining room full of strangers listening to my own son explain that my leg was too loud for his wedding. I gave that boy everything I had left in me, and he looked right past it like it was nothing at all. I don't know how long I sat there. Long enough for the light outside to go orange, then gray, then gone. My phone rang. Number I didn't recognize. Tulsa area code. I almost let it go to voicemail. A man who saves his son's life for free is not going to fund his wedding on a lie. That's what I'd decided, sitting there with that phone buzzing in my hand. The room gone dark except for the glow off the screen. I want you to remember that line, friend, because everything that follows comes straight out of it, I answered. Mr. Combs? A woman's voice. Young, a little rushed. Hi, this is Marissa. I'm the events director at the club for your son's wedding. I'm so sorry to bother you this late. Here we go. I'm so sorry, she said again, but we're having some trouble with the final payment. The wire transfer from your attorney's office didn't clear this afternoon, and the bank flagged the funding source as blocked entirely. The bride's mother said to call you directly, said you'd handle it. Is everything all right? I sat there in that recliner, that old photograph still in my other hand, chocolate dripping down an 8-year-old's fist frozen forever in a snapshot. I looked at my scarred knuckles wrapped around the phone. Is everything all right? I almost laughed. It came out instead as something low and tired, a sound I didn't quite recognize as my own voice. No, I said. Everything is not all right. Silence on her end. I could hear a copier running somewhere behind her, fluorescent lights humming. Cancel the booking, I said. Her breath caught. I'm sorry, sir. Cancel it. All of it. Mr. Combs, the contract is in your name. Her voice picked up speed now. The particular panic of someone realizing they're about to deliver very bad news to the very wrong man at the very wrong moment. If we cancel now, the deposit is forfeited. That's $35,000. I know. Sir, I really don't think you understand. That's non-refundable. Once we process, I know, I said again, calmer this time, almost gentle. Cancel it anyway. And I hung up. I didn't call Dale. I didn't call Carol. I sat there in the dark with a decade-old photograph and let the silence do the talking for me. You want to know something? That was the first time in 20 years I felt like I had a hand on the wheel of anything. Not rage. Not revenge. Not yet. That word gets thrown around too easy. And this wasn't about revenge. Not in that moment. It was about a man finally putting his foot down and saying no more. $35,000 gone, just like that. And he didn't even know it happened yet. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was scared of what I'd done. I want to be clear about that. I slept fine with the decision itself. What kept me up was the waiting. Waiting for the phone to ring again. It didn't ring that night. It rang the next morning at 7:15, while I was standing at my kitchen counter eating a bowl of oatmeal with a little cinnamon stirred in, the same breakfast I've had since Dale was still in diapers. His name lit up the screen. I let it ring twice, mostly to see if my hand would shake. It didn't. Dad? His voice was tight, high, the voice of a man who hadn't slept. Dad, what did you do? The club called Mom. They said the booking's canceled. They said you told them to cancel it. Is that true? There it is. Not are you okay? Not I'm sorry about the dinner. Just what did you do to my wedding? It's true, I said. Why would you do that? His voice cracked, and for half a second I felt the old pull, that instinct that had run my whole life as his father. Fix it. Make it better. Say sorry, even when you're not the one who did a single thing wrong. I didn't say sorry. You told me to sit up front and not walk you. Dale, I said. I'm just giving you a little more room to figure out who's going to pay for all of it. He went quiet. I could hear him breathing, sharp and uneven, and somewhere behind him, Carol's voice, muffled, asking what was going on. You're being cruel, Dale finally said. Cruel. That word landed somewhere behind my ribs and just sat there, ugly and heavy. No, son, I said, and my voice came out steadier than I expected. I'm being finished. I hung up before he could answer. Here's something you should know about a discretionary trust, friend. It's a legal vault. I built it to protect Dale from other people. And if I'm honest, from my own instinct to hand him everything I had. Because it's discretionary, that means I have the final say on every dollar that leaves it. It runs entirely through me. But Roger was slick. He'd convinced Dale to sign a stack of paperwork the year before, using his future milestone payouts as guarantee on a commercial loan Roger was taking out. Here's the catch, though. A bank won't accept a discretionary trust as collateral unless the trustee, me, signs off on it personally. Roger knew I'd say no, so he did what desperate men do. He forged my signature on the guarantee. Figured he'd use the incoming wedding gifts and payouts to quietly clear the debt before anyone noticed a thing. He miscalculated badly. Monday morning I called my attorney, a sharp woman named Diane Whitcomb, and told her to freeze every distribution tied to that wedding. By Wednesday, the dominoes had already started tipping. The florist, the caterer, the string quartet, every invoice bounced back marked insufficient funds. But I didn't stop there. I also pulled the trust backing off the bridge loan Carol and Roger had been using to cover their house payments past what Roger's real income could support. Instead of calling to ask what was going on, Carol and Dale decided to go public with it. My neighbor, a woman named Judith, who's lived next door to me for 11 years, knocked on my door Thursday evening holding her phone out like it might go off in her hand. Carol had gone full production, ring light, kitchen island, tears right on cue. Tagged half the Tulsa community groups and the Fenwick family's business page directly, dabbing at her eyes, saying her son's biological father was holding his wedding hostage out of pure jealousy because another man was going to walk him down the aisle. Said I was bitter and vindictive. Pinned a comment right at the top. The Fenwicks have lawyers on retainer and we intend to use them. The internet did what it always does. Hundreds of strangers calling me every name in the book. But Carol made a fatal mistake. By tagging the Fenwick's public page directly, she dragged a messy, low-rent internet fight straight to the front porch of a family that survives on discretion. She thought she was weaponizing them against me. Instead, she guaranteed they'd cut Dale and her loose the second things got embarrassing. And then the trap sprang shut on its own. When the automated bridge loan payment on Carol and Roger's house bounced that Tuesday, it triggered an immediate flag in the bank's compliance office. A human auditor pulled the actual file to see why a multi-million-dollar trust had suddenly missed a scheduled payment. They looked at Roger's commercial loan paperwork. They looked at the guarantee signature. Then they called Diane to verify it. She took one look at that forged document and told them the plain truth. Walter Combs never signed this. By Wednesday afternoon, it wasn't a family squabble anymore. It was a federal bank fraud file with an active case number. The bank froze every account tied to Roger and called his commercial loan due in full, immediately. At the same time, Diane enforced the penalty clauses buried in the house bridge loan. Their mortgage payment more than tripled overnight, with 30 days to pay it or vacate. Roger Ashby, smooth-talking independent energy consultant, was staring down a federal default and an eviction notice inside a house he'd never actually been able to afford. Sitting next to a wife who'd just torched her ex-husband's name across the internet for a wedding that no longer had anywhere to happen. I won't lie to you, friend. There was a small, ugly, very human part of me that felt something close to satisfaction sitting in the middle of all that. But mostly I just felt tired. I want you to understand something about this stretch of time, because it's easy to make it sound like I was some kind of mastermind sitting in a dark room pulling strings with a grin on my face. That wasn't it at all. Mostly it was quiet. I went to work, inspection sites out past Sand Springs, same as always. Clocked in, did my job, kept my head down, came home. Stopped by a little barbecue place on Admiral a couple nights that week. Sat alone at the counter with a plate of ribs, because some things a man does just to remember what ordinary feels like. I didn't check Facebook myself. Judith did that for me, God bless her, showing up at my door every couple of days with updates I never asked for but somehow needed to hear anyway. They took the second video down, she told me on a Friday. The one about the Fenwicks. That's smart, Walter. She looked at me the way people look at you when they're trying to figure out if you're actually all right. You doing okay? Was I doing okay? I thought about that dinner table, About Dale's face when he looked at my leg like it belonged to a stranger. About 28 years of Saturdays, chocolate ice cream, a boy on my shoulders yelling, "There's my hero," to a catwalk full of men who believed it every bit as much as I did. I will be, I told her. And for the first time in a long while, I actually believed it. My phone buzzed on the counter. A text, no name attached, just a number I recognized as Carol's sister. Somebody who hadn't spoken to me directly in almost a decade. "Walter, you need to see this. Call me." I stared at that message a long moment. Whatever this was, I thought, it wasn't going to be good news for somebody. I picked up the phone and dialed. Some men beg on their knees for money. My son did it on my living room floor, and I still remember every single word of it. Let me back up a little first. That call from Carol's sister, a woman named Denise, I hadn't spoken to since maybe 2016, that was the first domino I didn't push myself. That one fell all on its own. "Walter, it's Denise," she said when I called back, voice tight and quick. "I probably shouldn't be calling you. Carol would kill me. But somebody needs to. Denise, what's going on?" "Roger's gone." I sat down slow on my kitchen stool. "Gone where?" "Nobody knows." The second the bank flagged that forged signature and froze his accounts, he knew it was over. Packed a bag that same night. Didn't say a word to Carol. She woke up to an empty closet and federal agents serving a warrant at her own front door. He knew the fraud charges were coming, Walter. Ran before they could put cuffs on him. Coward. Straight through. I called it from the start, and I still hate being right. "And the house?" I asked, already knowing. Notice of default came Thursday, 30 days before the bank starts the foreclosure. I looked down at my own hand wrapped around the phone. Scarred. The fingers a little stiff even now. The same hand that got called too loud, too visible, not good enough to walk a boy down an aisle, not even a month before. These hands paid for that house. And the man who called himself good enough to walk my son down that aisle abandoned him the second things turned hard. Funny how that works out every time. "Thanks for telling me, Denise," I said. "Walter," she hesitated. "Are you going to help them?" I didn't answer that. Not because I didn't know the answer. Because I wasn't ready to say it out loud yet, not even to Denise. I just told her goodnight and hung up. I heard about the rest through Judith. Same as everything else that month. The Fenwicks found out about the fraud investigation that same week. Small city, remember. Everybody's one phone call removed from everybody else, and old money families like the Fenwicks have a great many phone calls at their disposal. A stepfather under federal scrutiny, a public smear campaign gone sideways and looking less like righteous anger and more like a family collapsing in real time on the internet, a canceled venue, a frozen trust that had clearly been propping up their whole lifestyle. None of that plays well at a club with a waiting list. Sabrina, Dale's fiancée, nice enough young woman from the little I'd seen of her, though clearly raised by people who valued appearances above most things, told him on a Sunday afternoon that her family had decided the risk to their name wasn't worth carrying forward. Families like that don't survive scandal by association. They survive it by getting far away from it, fast. With a clean public statement wishing the young man well and never once using the words fraud or lawsuit or trust again. The wedding was off. Just like that. $100,000 wedding gone. Fiancé gone. Stepfather gone. House about to be gone. And every one of those things had my name quietly written somewhere underneath it, holding the whole structure up long after I'd stopped agreeing to hold it up for free. I won't pretend I didn't feel something when I heard. But it wasn't joy. It wasn't even satisfaction. Not really. It was something quieter and heavier than either of those. It felt like watching a house of cards fall down on a foundation I'd poured myself and never once been thanked for pouring. It was a Tuesday evening, about 3 weeks after that dinner, when I heard the knock at my door. I knew before I even opened it. Some part of a man always knows. I opened the door, and there they were, Carol and Dale, standing in my little front hallway, looking about as far from that country club dining room as two people could get. Carol's makeup was smudged, her hair pulled back messy instead of styled. Dale looked like he hadn't slept in a week, hollow around the eyes, his hands shaking slightly at his sides. The hands that used to hold mine on Saturday mornings. now shaking like that. Dad. Carol's voice cracked on the word. Can we come in? A month ago, she'd called me a bitter, jealous man on the internet in front of thousands of strangers. Now she was standing in my hallway, asking permission to walk through my door. I stepped back and let them in. Not because I owed either one of them a single thing, because whatever I was about to say, I wanted to say it sitting down, and I wanted them looking me in the eye while I said it. They sat on my couch, small, second-hand, nothing fancy, the kind of couch that probably embarrassed them more than my leg brace ever had. I sat across from them in the one good chair I own, and I waited. I'd waited 20 years for this conversation. I could wait another minute or two. Dale broke first. He slid right off that couch onto his knees on my living room floor, and I want to tell you that didn't do something to me, watching my own son kneel down in front of me, but I'd be lying straight through my teeth if I said that. Dad, please, he said, his voice raw, cracked clean down the middle. I know you're angry. I know I hurt you. Angry doesn't begin to cover it, son. Go on. The venue's gone. The house, we're going to lose the house. Roger's gone too, Dad. He just left. Didn't even say goodbye, and I don't. He stopped, pressing his shaking hands against his face. The federal agents came to the house, Dad. They said he forged your signature. They said he used me to commit bank fraud, and now everything's gone. I don't know what to do. Please, just release the trust. Please. Ah. Carol was crying now, too. Quiet and controlled. The practiced kind of crying that had worked on plenty of people before it ever got to me. Walter, we're begging you. We have nowhere else to go. You have nowhere else to go. 20 years ago, I had third-degree burns, clean up one leg, and no one on this earth kneeling on a floor for me. I didn't say any of that yet. I let the silence sit there heavy while Dale cried on my carpet. And then he said the thing I didn't see coming, even after everything. I remember the Saturdays, he said, barely above a whisper, looking up at me with eyes that for just a second looked like the 8-year-old who used to ride my shoulders to Brahms. I remember the chocolate. I remember. He stopped. Come on, son. Say it. Finish the sentence. His mouth opened, then closed. Something moved behind his eyes. Something old. Something buried under 20 years of his mother's careful reconstruction. And for one full second, I thought he was finally going to say it. I remember what happened at the plant. I remember what you did for me. He didn't say it. He looked down at the carpet instead, and whatever had almost surfaced went right back under. He knows. Ah. Somewhere in there, underneath everything his mother built brick by brick, he knows exactly what this leg cost me for his sake, and he still can't bring himself to say it out loud. Even now, even on his knees. That's the moment something in me finally, fully closed. I stood up, slow, unhurried, the way a man stands when he's made peace with a decision instead of just reacting to one. I walked over to the small table by the window, the one with 2 chairs where I eat breakfast alone most mornings, and I sat down. I looked at the both of them, still on my couch and my floor, and I waited until Dale lifted his head to look at me. Then I rolled up my pant leg, right there in the lamplight, so there was no mistaking what he was looking at. Scarred, twisted skin from the knee down, the brace strapped over it, plain, in full view, where nobody could look away from it anymore. You said this leg was too loud for your wedding, I said. My voice didn't shake. I want that on the record. It did not shake at all. But this leg is the only reason you've got a whole body left to stand up in that wedding at all. Dale made a sound like the air had been knocked clean out of him. I saved you once, son, I said. I won't save you twice. Nobody moved. Carol had gone completely pale, her hand pressed over her mouth. Dale just knelt there staring at my leg like he was seeing it, really seeing it, for the first time in his entire life. 28 years. 28 years of Saturdays and chocolate ice cream and a settlement I never spent one dime of. And it took him kneeling on the wreckage of everything I built for him to finally look at this leg and understand what it actually meant. Too late, son. Too late. I stood up. I walked past both of them, past the couch, past 28 years of a life I gave everything I had to build, and I went to the window. Tulsa was doing its evening thing out there, streetlights flickering on along Peoria, somebody's sprinkler running 2 yards down. Ordinary life, going on ordinary and indifferent to whatever had just happened in my living room. I heard Carol behind me, her voice breaking. "Walter, please, we have nowhere." I didn't turn around. I reached up and closed the curtain. I heard them sit there a moment longer, the particular silence of two people realizing there's nothing left to say that's going to change one single thing. Then I heard the couch creak, footsteps, the door opening and closing. Quiet. None of the drama of that dining room, none of the ring lights and the accusations, just quiet. I didn't watch them leave. I stood at that closed curtain a long time, my hand resting flat on the windowsill, and I let the house go silent around me. I'll give you the rest quick, friend, because you've earned the ending, and I don't believe in dragging out good news any more than I believe in dragging out bad news. Carol and Dale were out of that house within the month. Because it was an unbacked bridge loan and not a standard mortgage, the bank moved fast, 30 days to clear out before the locks changed, quiet and unglamorous. None of the internet fanfare that came along with the accusations the first time around. Last I heard through Denise, they'd moved into a 2-bedroom rental over in Broken Arrow, modest, unremarkable. The kind of place I'd lived in most of my adult life, while they'd been living in a house with a pool and a 3-car garage. Roger never resurfaced in Tulsa. Word got around eventually, same small city grapevine that told me everything else, that the fraud investigation turned into real federal charges. Wire fraud, false collateral representation, the whole ugly list. Last anybody heard, he was somewhere down in Texas, living considerably smaller than the leased truck years, waiting on a court date he couldn't talk his way out of this time. A coward straight through to the end. Didn't even have the spine to stick around and face what he'd built. The Phoenix never spoke to Dale again. Not one call, not one message, nothing but a clean, well-lawyered silence. The kind families with that much money are very, very good at producing on command. As for the trust, I never released it. Not the wedding money, not the house money, none of it. Diane restructured the whole thing eventually, locked it down tighter than before, with new terms making sure nobody but Dale himself, as a grown man making his own honest choices, could ever touch it again. No stepfather, no mother, no in-laws family leaning on him, just him, if he ever earns his own way back to deserving it. Maybe someday he will. That's not mine to decide anymore. That's his. As for me, I still live in that same small house off Peoria, still drive that same Ford pickup, still work the same steady trade out past Sand Springs, still stop into that barbecue place on Admiral some nights, alone at the counter, same as always. Earl still calls me every year, right around the anniversary, same as always too. Last time we talked, he said something that stuck with me. "You did good, Combs," he said. "Not the wedding thing. The other thing. 20 years ago you did good. I know, Earl. I've always known. It just took the rest of the world a while to catch up to it. Some Saturdays, when the weather's decent, I still drive past that old Brahms. I still order chocolate, even though I never much cared for chocolate myself. Never did, not really. I just liked watching him eat it. I sit in the truck a while afterward, and I look down at this leg, scarred and stiff and, I'll say it, still beautiful in its own way, and I think about an 8-year-old boy on my shoulders screaming, "There's my hero," to a catwalk full of men who believed him completely. I'd still do it again. 1,000 times over, I'd still do it again. That was never the question. It was never going to be the question. The question was whether he'd ever be brave enough to say thank you out loud. He wasn't. Not yet. Anyway. But this leg, it's not waiting around on him for it anymore. If this one meant something to you, tell me where you're listening from, friend. I'll see you next time. The love we give doesn't need to be seen to be real, but it does need, someday, to be spoken out loud. Say thank you now, while the hands or the legs that carried you are still here to hear it. Gratitude costs nothing, and it's the one gift that can never be forged, frozen, or taken back once it's truly given. A small note for you. This story was written and fictionalized by AI purely for entertainment, though we hope its lesson about gratitude stays with you as something real and good.